All right, so organizational structure. I already talked about this a little bit. What is your company structured like? How should you devise it? Of course, usually starts with a startup, just 3 or 4 guys, 3 or 4 software engineers who are really clever, and they start sort of the development department. And you see that what's grown or born within the development group usually stays for years and years. So if you look, for instance, at Google, they had Sergey and the other guy. They started in a very innovative place, sort of university offices, and they could do whatever they wanted. So they stuck to that in the company, which is pretty cool. So specific question. Well, how is, for instance, the Twitter company organized? Do you have any picture of how large their sales department could be? How large their development department could be? Is it just one product that they're working on, or maybe are they working also on other products? I guess they're mostly, I think I already have a bit of a picture. I guess that they have both a development department and also a systems admin department. And I think that they're about the same size also in terms of developers. So the systems admin guys are trying to keep things up and running, which is really, really hard if you're as intensely used as Twitter, as many of you may know. How many people are working with Hives? Can anybody do an estimate? I don't know the actual number, so you're always right. 20?
60 maybe.
60 maybe?
80.
Maybe? Yeah. Okay, that was a bit strange. I would expect around about 80, 90, maybe even 200, somewhere in that range. Oh, you know?
165.
165? Yeah, that's what you said. Good. Okay, so my estimate wasn't so far off. Okay, so what's the ratio of developers and testers at Microsoft? Kind of ties in with our previous little intermezzo. Oh, also interesting question, what is more profitable, license selling or the services attached to it? Do you have an answer or a question?
Yeah, would it be like a fair question? Wouldn't there be like a very big difference in short-term or long-term profits and certainty of keeping the customer?
We're talking about this last question?
Yeah.
Yeah? Well, we will be talking about this a lot more, but well, the thing is, there's a whole different, there's different factors that play a part here. There's of course the traditional lump sum contracts. Used to be that every large company at some point had to buy a large ERP system. And these were the $5 to $10 million or euro deals. So these were like, okay, we are going to buy SAP, and for the next 5 years, we'll be spending a lot of money on this. Now, it's these kinds of contracts that don't longer exist. It's sort of not of this day and age. Nowadays, you would say, okay, let's start a Google Doc together. And with the Google Doc, you and I could do probably more than you could do with a very expensive SAP deployment. So, you know, these are fairly interesting changes. So, a company like 37 Signals, they built Basecamp. Basecamp is sort of like a project management environment. And they, within the first year, I think, had almost 100,000 customers who were all paying $15, $20 a month. So they grew to a very profitable company very quickly. That's very different from these large mammoths of companies that are, you know, making these lump sum contracts. And I get the feeling that they were more profitable than these service companies. In terms of, although 37 Signals might just be the exception there. But that's a whole side story. But we'll be talking about that more later.
I think it became visible in the story you told about Exact as well, where they were selling a product for licenses and were making high profits.
Yes.
And moved to a SaaS environment and are actually seeing the profits decline.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. There's also a whole point of how much does a customer cost to acquire. So in the case of the 10 million contract, you can take these guys onto you know, vacations. You can take the management guys and give them big gifts and send them all over to nice places and say, okay, we've spent maybe 1 million on getting this contract, but now we have a 7 million contract, so it's totally worth it. Well, you wouldn't be spending 1 million, but you know, in sales acquisition cost. If it's a customer like Exact that pays 25 euros a month, then how much money can you spend to acquire that customer? 25, 50, 100? Well, depending on how much risk you want to take. I mean, you could take a year's profit, but then you have to make sure that this customer will also stay for 1 year, at least. So these are very interesting questions we'll get into later also. Okay, so what's the optimal structure for a product software company? I'll give you the average structure, not the optimal one, I think. Can generic structures be recognized, and what are benchmark figures for function ratio? So we'll talk about that a little bit now. So this is sort of my perspective on software companies. I created this picture and we wanted to use this as a replacement for the research framework that you know, but Jacques didn't like it, so we're just keeping it as a company structure. And this is sort of a typical company, or most of the functions for a software company are in here. So you have, for instance, ecosystem engineering. How's your product and platform strategy? How are you doing your marketing? We have operational management, so these are just the traditional roles of sales and implementation and support. This would be true if you were a device manufacturer just as much. Then of course you have development management, you have product management, requirements engineering, a bit of development, and then of course configuration, quality and delivery management, testing, deployment, usage. And I think, well, there's some sort of overlying contextual forces like resource provisioning, laws and regulations, entrepreneurship, economy, and they determine how successful your company can be in a specific environment. So Twitter will probably have a similar structure to this. Maybe we're missing some small parts here, or some very specific domain-specific parts here, but we'll have a structure like this. So to zoom in a little bit, here you can see typically what the percentages are for these different departments. So typically the board is about 5%, including the secretaries that support the board. There's development, usually about 30% of the company, marketing 10%, sales 20%, services 30%. Of course, this is fairly variable. This can be 60% for some companies. IBM, for IBM, I think its services is about 60 or 70%. And then, of course, support is also 5 to 15% around about. So here you see the specific departments that make up the software company. Anything missing here? I think I just mentioned sysadmin for Twitter. I think that's a role that's becoming more and more important with the introduction of SaaS. So think for instance about Hives. I think within Hives there's a team of at least 10 to 50 people trying to keep things up and running. Why do I make my estimate so high? Because Hive software is quite low quality. Don't tell the guys I said this, but they might find out on the internet quite soon. So here's some typical structures. These are sort of reference architectures, if you want to call them that. Let me see. So functional structure, product structure, market structure, and geographic. I already talked a little bit. I gave the geographic example. If you're a sales organization, that's frequently split up by geography. So yeah, I live in The Hague, so I will be doing the south of the Netherlands, but all the way up to Brabant. But I won't be doing Limburg, because somebody else can do that. Of course, also you can have market division. So, this is something you fairly typically see for companies who have very different market, or very heterogeneous market. Think of, for instance, about Exact. Exact has to sell e-synergy, or synergy it's called now, to large accounts. SMEs use Exact Online. Public, they don't even have that. Banking and insurance, well, they don't go by market so specific, I think. Then, of course, by product. So you can imagine that a company like Unit 4, they have 60 products, so each of these products is a separate business unit, and that has its own structure again. So if one of you does Unit 4, you can do one product, and maybe you can help one of us out by giving them another team or another product team. And then of course functional. Well, this is also your typical company, especially starting companies with about 20, 30 people will have first developed this kind of structure where you have HRM, sales and marketing. Alright, so here we have Netcom, nice example. And here you see, well, it's obviously a little bit by market. So you have the global business areas division, the mobile division, and the contact center and office division. You can see that each three of these are probably different products. So this could be a fee structure or even a market structure. You see here in the sales departments, you see already that it's sales by geographic. So you can see different structures here. So if you were to give me this in your assignment, because of course your assignments will look fairly similar to this, you'll say, well, they have a market structure on the highest level, but then on the lower level here they have a geographic structure. So for you, that's also for you to find out. Baan. Some of the slides still come from Jacques' history at Baan. He was a very long time CTO, or not CTO, but a technical manager at Baan. So here you see, well, they have I think sort of a market structure, and then under that they have again sort of a product structure, you could say. So ERP, business intelligence, localization. So you can see it's a very interesting structure in that sense. There at the top they have HRM, so that's a bit weird, of a weird place. You would expect that more on one of these red lines, but of course this is only the development department. So if you look a level higher, then the guys who are in this HRM are probably also in the overarching HRM of the company. Also quite interesting, they did the same as Unit 4, so they bought a lot of companies and they would put them under emerging applications, which was just a separate unit. So here you have your standard F structure. I already said, typical company in pretty much, from 30 employees upwards to, 10,000 employees will have this structure. R&D, marketing, sales, services, support. Services being, again, the guys who go to a company and, implement your product, or and support, of course, the guys being the guys with the headsets, or girls. What's interesting about this is that, well, you can see where the costs and where the profits are. So R&D and marketing, they just cost money. Marketing, you can tell me the difference between marketing and sales, by the way? What's the difference between the two?
Marketing to the masses, I think. To anyone, advertising, mass media, and sales would be prospects and account managing.
I love these terms. These are the terms that you should all at some point know. What is an account manager? What are prospects? Prospects are future customers. So it's the marketing guys that create prospects, and then it's the sales guys that close the deal with the prospect for a final account.
Is it always true that services and support are gains? Or I can imagine that some companies have a business model where they offer support or services.
That's actually a very good question, and the answer is indeed you're right. Support is usually can also be a cost center. That's true, because if, as you can imagine, if you just have a help desk that answers questions and people are not paying to call that help desk, then they're not making any profits right there. Hey. So that's good. That's a good question. And quite frequently, you'll also see that services and support are put together in some way. Especially if it's a small company, then the guy who implements the product. So let's take a look, for example, business base. With business base, there's project managers who implement the product, and they also are the guys who give the support eventually. Oh, and of course, you make profit once. This is true. I said before that if you have this structure, under that you can find more structures. So for services, typically you'll have a product structure. Of course, one guy knows more about one product than the other. For support, it's the same thing. If a support engineer picks up the phone, he or she better know what he's talking about. Well, sales can be anything. So it could be P structure with an underlying geographic, so product structure with an underlying geographic structure with an underlying market structure. It could be any of these three. Well, marketing can be, also P structure, but also more generic, just a group of people doing the marketing for the product. And then R&D is usually the product structure, which is why you want to have different people intermingling for different products. There are reasons, but usually that's not true. So, E-type for R&D, like I said, that's sort of the traditional way of doing it. R&D departments are responsible for a product line, so that's different products that can be put together and maybe create new products. So what are typical functions there? Product management. Well, in liaison with marketing, usually the not so technical guys who really know everything about the product. They know every nook and cranny, every button that can be clicked. And they're also thinking about the future. Not just the future, like where should we put the next button or what will be the next screen, but also what will be the next development that will completely change our product around, or what will be the next market opportunity in this. Take for instance, Exact, and Exact Online guys are not just thinking about how will we process next year's tax rules, because they're marginally interesting. Essential, but marginally interesting. But they are interested in, okay, how will we connect to Rabobank, ING, and synchronize with those banks automatically? Well, these banks still have these really traditional, very secure ways of giving access to these things. Also important, quality and delivery. Here you see quality and delivery. This is a BAM example. The quality and delivery is sort of a side unit, and they can divide their attention over to different products, which has an advantage that you can spend the most attention to the products that are most successful or that are the most money. But also you typically see that these roles are in the product units themselves, depending on the knowledge you need. So ownership of R&D. Typically you see that these teams have, yeah, like I said before, sometimes the testing department is also part of a specific team. So here you see that there's different teams who work under a product manager and an architect. So this could be sort of under one product again. So if we go back here, then you can see that, okay, this red block, product 1, is where the development manager sits, and then we go all the way down. So you can have different teams working on one product, for instance, working on different parts of the product. There's Conway's Law here, which is quite interesting. That you see that these teams, they deliver separate components, and therefore these components you can really sort of see in the architecture, hey, these components come from that team, these components come from that team, because there will be more cohesion. So these components will be closer together if they come from the same team than when they come from a different team. And they're responsible for all the tasks of development, design, realization, that's development, testing, configuration management, documentation. All right, end time for sales. So this is per market. I think I already mentioned this a little bit. Large accounts, SMEs, banking and insurance. Can anybody tell me why you would want to split these two? Why you would, for instance, want to have a separate guy for SMEs and a separate guy or girl for large accounts? Not you three, or you two? And also not you. You've answered too many questions.
First of all, what is SME?
Small.
SME.
Oh, SME, small and medium enterprises. So that's mom and pop shops, 1, 2, 3 guys who own all the way up to around about 100 people, you could say.
Okay, I think the difference is that they probably want different things.
They want different things. Yeah, that's a very good way of saying it. Also, do you think with the profile that, you know, who would you like to be in this category? Who would you like to be in this category? Do you think that a guy, you know, smoking a cigar, driving a Mercedes should go to these customers or these customers? Yeah.
Probably to the large accounts.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what they expect.
That's what they expect, exactly. Yeah, of course the question there is what's reasonable. I mean, nowadays everybody has to drive with a Polo slow motion, a blue motion. So you can see that there's a difference there. Also, I mean, here, like I said before, closing a deal here can be you can only spend so much money on that. So you can go through, if you're selling a POS, point of sale systems, you can go through shopping street and maybe sell it to 1 or 3 or 4 shops there. And you could spend 15 minutes per shop, because after that, you know, you're over spending your time on them. Whereas with these large accounts, like I said, you can go on a business trip with these guys, you can go to large conferences and spend a lot of time with them. Yeah, so also important when you start to make your contracts, you need some legal support. I have an example of a startup that recently had to get all their contracts made up. They sold their product a couple of times and they were like, we actually have no real contract. When the customer said, can we please have a contract? They didn't have one. So that's how this legal department started. And you can also already see that they bought these services from a girl who was sort of a part-time lawyer, but the rest of the time she's studying and doing other things. And now she's being hired more and more by this startup, and I'm quite sure that soon she'll be hired by the company as a part-time or maybe even full-time person. So other departments, well, like we talked about marketing a little bit, usually for the whole company. So think for instance of Deloitte. Deloitte has the green dot at the end. I think we all have some idea of what they mean with green dot. There was a marketing department that thought about it. They didn't think about, okay, how are we going to sell our ERP implementation? They're thinking about this beautiful dot, which can be useful, I guess. Uniform market presentation, so make sure that we all have the same PowerPoint template. They do market launch, so they make sure that all the activities are coordinated in the same way, so that they don't have like some bad news coming out about the company one week and then the next week do a product launch, because that would be bad. Also customer reference stories, typical things like that. Yeah, services support. Anybody here ever work on help desk? Yes? So did you have first line, second line, third line support?
Not in this organization.
No, it's too small, yeah. Yeah, I worked at, well, not at KPN, but at a customer or a service provider for KPN. And then we would be second line engineers for the ISDN help desk back in the day when ISDN was all hip and happening. It was pretty cool because we had the third line support, and you noticed that procedures became less and less formal as you got higher up the tree. So I was sort of a laid back feet on the table department, whereas the first line were all guys dressed up in suits, even though they were on the phone, which I never really understood. That's the way it was. And also quite typically you see that third line support is just a developer. With Microsoft, for instance, I think the developers are like the 5th or 6th line of support. If you get to that level, you'll be paying about 300 or 400 euros an hour just to have them on the phone. But I've heard people do it and they say, well, it's amazing because these guys know everything about the product they built it, so they should know. And especially if you're a software company building on top of Microsoft technology, it's just worth it calling them and being on the phone with the Microsoft team. Alright, how are we doing on time? Is that clock right? Yes, doing great. Alright, so I'll try and squeeze this little part in, maybe even make it all the way to the end. So we'll be talking a little bit about software product management. One of your assignments is also in this whole tree to find where the product manager is. Product management is something that we sort of take very seriously because we had a PhD student in that area who then became a full professor here, assistant professor, and she unfortunately left. But we still have a lot of material from that, and we think that this role is a role that you too at some point could pick up. So what does the product manager do? Basically, the product manager has to turn feature requests into software to make it a little bit highest level. But that's not quite true because the product manager sits in the center of everyone. They give their sort of requirements to the development team. Development then turns it into actual functional features. Then the features have to be tested. They have to be checked whether they actually fulfill the requirements. And then eventually the product manager can say, okay, now it's all good enough. Let's release it. So it's a very important function, but no power whatsoever, because there's always the CEO who has more power or the development manager.
I actually know someone who's product manager at SNS,
Oh, great.
but they're actually thinking about scrapping his job because they think it's worth it.
Could be. Could be. I think it was software companies is becoming more and more important. So it could be for SNS, but for software companies, it's essential. So it basically sits between the board, has to keep an eye on the market trends. Like I said before, it's also the person who sort of knows what's going to happen to this kind of product in 5 years, knows the best competition. And usually, well, you can see it by the stacks of paper, is a person who's very, very busy and a little bit overloaded with tasks. Well, gets bugs, change requests, scope changes. Usually these guys are just developers that weren't so good at development and started doing more and more documentation and turned out to be very good at this. Or they're salespeople who want to be closer to development or project managers. So it's not always the guys with the best training. So what is this person responsible for? Requirements management, the release plan, the roadmap, and the portfolio management. And the question is, where is this product manager? So that's the question you also will have to ask at the company. This person can be within marketing, within R&D, or could be sort of an overall function, or inside each product development team. So that's something you need to find out also. And it determines sort of which responsibilities, which activities, and who he or she talks to. So these are all things that I want you to find out and write maybe half a page or 1 page about. So let's talk a little bit about this variability that I just mentioned. Where's the product manager? Well, it can be here, can be there, can be there, and can be there. So to give you a nice overview, of course this only works on the PowerPoint version. In the PDF version you just have them everywhere. So I hope that gives you a clear picture of where they can be. There they all are. Alright, so now that sort of finishes today's class, but I wanted to show you one more fun thing. Are there any questions at this point about the software industry, product software, the course, finding a company? No worries, questions? Yes?
Still need a partner.
Ah, good. Yeah, you're not alone. He needs a partner. He needs everybody needs a partner. Okay, try to sort of organically do this, and then Thursday I'll check one more time and see if I can put some people together. But maybe you can already form a group like in the back, so that I can stay away from this. Form your groups. Any other issues? Good. All right, then I'll talk a little bit about Netherware. I already talked about Netherware earlier when I said that we have this course where students in 10 weeks have to develop a business plan en a software prototype. Ik kan het vanaf nu in het Nederlands doen, want het hoeft toch niet op de video. En het leuke is, daarbinnen kun je